Thank you, Lisa. So welcome again to everyone for joining us today. We have a lovely program for you today of ACIAR project leaders who will be doing short 5-minute presentations on each of the projects that are available for scholarships this year. They've suggested project topics for Masters or PhD or both, which you should all have access to from all the information that's been available on multiple websites and platforms if you've had a look at that already. And if you were able to join our Zoom Q&A session last Friday, thank you very much for joining that. But if not, the video recording is available on the PASS-CR website, and we can send you the link to that if you don't have it. So I'd like to first start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we all meet today across the world, and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So I think we'll hand straight over. We have a lot to get through today. So I'll hand you straight over to Mai Alakan, the manager of the Pacific and PNG office in Fiji. Are you here, Mai?
Hi.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning. Hi, Linda, good morning. I hope my audio is good this time around.
It's very good, thank you, Mai.
Okay, I hope it stays that way. Good morning to everyone. It is welcome to this session where our potential scholars will have an interaction with ACIAR partners working in the Pacific. Also, thank you again to USC for coordinating this activity, but more importantly as well to FNU and USP, who are our partners in country and delivering as well this capacity building initiative through postgraduate scholarship in agriculture and forestry and fisheries, with a focus on climate resilience. Also to our project leaders for taking time out in your busy schedule to join us, but also our great appreciation to the teams for the strong interest to further build capacities of future researchers. As all of you, those that are now in this call, that are aiming to perhaps get a postgraduate degree in agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. We are also very much thankful that you have taken interest and where ACIAR's partnership in the Pacific through the research program will be of great value to your academic but also professional development through this scholarship. We do hope that there is that opportunity for you to take on this scholarship. Not more, I guess there's nothing much to add, but again, we see this capacity building program through this Pacific Agriculture Scholarship and Support Initiative with a focus on climate resilience as an important initiative of providing support and assistance to building capacity of research in agriculture, fisheries, and forestry. And through this program, we are also seeing an opportunity for our scholars to have that next step and building their career in research. And that's why it's important that as part of your scholarship, there is that clear aspect of research that is associated to an ongoing project where you can see where the results of your research will find its way into direct impact pathways in your areas that you are interested. So I guess I will leave it up to that. And again, thank you to everyone for making time out for this session. And this is one of a series of sessions and interactions between the potential scholars and the project leaders. Again, thank you very much, Bula Vinaka, and I hope everyone has a productive next 2 hours. Thanks. Linda, over to you.
Thank you, Mai, for that lovely warm welcome and introduction to the programme. I think we'll get started now with our ACIAR project leaders. And first off the rank is Natalie Doran-Brown, who is the principal scientist with Agricultural Research Advisors, and she's going to be presenting on a climate change project supporting greenhouse gas inventories and livestock data development in Fiji. And I think that, Natalie, you're going to share your screen, is that correct?
That is correct. I'll just...
Thank you, Natalie.
Okay, so you should be able to see this presentation.
Fantastic.
Now. So our ACIAR project is based in Fiji. It's all around the climate change space, particularly with trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we have a fantastic project team. I've pulled together a number of organizations from both within Fiji and in Australia. And so this project works closely with those from the Ministry of Economy and Ministry of Agriculture. And then we have experts on the agriculture, governance and gender side from Australia. And I'll go through that in more detail. So the project is really split into two discrete parts. The first is around developing the existing national inventory systems in Fiji. So for every country in the world, this is an ongoing process that needs to be done. It's the way that we record the level of emissions from each country. And it's very important in terms of being able to capture future reductions in emissions. So a great deal of work is required within the national inventory and within the systems and processes to do this. On the other side is developing local greenhouse gas emission factors. So this project looks at the livestock sector in particular. And the second part focuses on experimental research and is looking at both beef cattle and dairy cattle. So there's three potential postgraduate research topic areas that align well with this project. And the first is about, as I mentioned, developing those inventory systems. So at the moment, Fiji mostly uses a tier 1 accounting, carbon accounting system. And what that means is that it just has the default values that have been set by the IPCC. And that's where countries generally start and develop from. But when it comes to agriculture and particularly livestock systems, there's no way of recording reductions in emissions if you're using that tier 1 system, because the only type of reduction it can capture is reducing animals. And that's obviously not a good solution in terms of food security. So we need to update the inventory. We need to allow more specific data and more specific calculations for this to occur and to be able to capture what is happening out on farms back into the national inventory system. So the technical side of the processes and the calculations, that's really only one part of the system. Of equal importance is the governance and what we call the institutional arrangements. So you have the Ministry of Economy that does all of the carbon accounting, but you have the data coming from different ministries and industries. So the Ministry of Agriculture is the one that collects all the data from the farms in Fiji. So there needs to be a lot of supporting structures within this, good communication, and some really robust frameworks that are developed. And so there's the potential for a research project in this space, and particularly around livestock systems, because livestock in Fiji account for over 95% of agricultural emissions. And that's why we're concentrating on it in this project. So this first topic around national inventory development will work closely with the Fijian Ministry of Economy. We have some of the experts from the carbon accounting team in Fiji that are part of the project. We also have governance experts from the Queensland University of Technology. And on the data side, the Fijian Ministry of Agriculture and Riverine Plains Agricultural Research Advisors is myself and other experts around carbon accounting, mitigation and international standards. So any students that align with this project have full access to the project team and the expertise that comes with that to assist and to help guide some of these research. So the next topic is around measuring greenhouse gas emissions from livestock. So I mentioned those tier 2 processes. They need local emission factors, and local emission factors are gathered by doing local research. So it has to be research that has been done in Fiji under Fijian conditions. So we know exactly how much methane the cattle in Fiji produce. So this project is funding the purchase of equipment that will be owned by the Ministry of Agriculture and will be used by this project. But this equipment will be available for use for postgraduate students as well. And the equipment we're using is called the SF6 equipment. You can see in this picture here, it uses harnesses around the cattle and has canisters attached near their mouths. So it will actually measure the amount of methane that comes out of the cattle. And that can then be processed and analysed. So one of the topics is around this in collaboration with Agricultural Victoria, again, the Ministry of Agriculture, but we also have USP and FNU as part of our project team, and they will be involved in the experimental research. So any postgraduate students that come through either university can connect with the people in the project team that are from the Fijian unis. And the final topic is around gender, because there is not a lot of research at the global level around the implications of mitigation action on women. So this is a great opportunity to be at the forefront of this research and to come up with some really cutting edge research that can potentially be applied in other places around the world. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Natalie. It was a very interesting presentation. And I think if you're interested in Natalie's project, we will have Zoom breakout rooms at the end of the presentations, and you'll be able to join that breakout room and have a conversation with Natalie. So we're going to move on to Dr. Sarah Burkhart, who is from the University of the Sunshine Coast. She is a senior lecturer in nutrition and dietetics, and she's talking today about her project, Food Production Systems, School Food Provision in the Pacific. And you can share your screen, Sarah, if you're ready.
Thank you, Linda. Is that coming through clearly?
Yes, it's wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say in advance too, it seems like my internet's a little bit unstable, I think, because of our weather at the moment. So if I do have to turn my camera off, that's just the reason. But I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about the project that we're working on. And this is a project which has only just started. So I'm just, I guess, going to set the scene for it and tell you a little bit about it. And one thing with this project is we haven't, I guess, drawn out very specific projects that can be for students within this because of the nature of the project and where we're at. But because school feeding programs are very multidisciplinary by nature, we're really keen to hear from any students that might have ideas of how they have projects that might sit within this one as well. So before telling you a little bit about the project, I just wanted to acknowledge the project team who are working on this as well. So we have Dr. Danny Hunter, Dr. John Oakshott, and Ms. Jessica Ranieri. Some context for this work, because I know it might not be on everyone's radar in terms of your interest areas, but over the past few years, there's been increasing interest in the Pacific region around school food provision or the provision of food in schools, and particularly thinking about how we can link that to local agriculture, which in a way helps not just to support the children who might be being provided with food in schools, but also helps with local producers. It has a bigger impact on the community more broadly. So within the region over the past few years, there has been some work looking at the capacity and scope of programs within schools, looking at nutrition education, school food provision, as well as thinking about how we can link in activities like gardens into schools and the benefits of those. And this is alongside a global movement towards more work in terms of school food provision or school feeding programs as well. So just, I guess, my bias, but I think it's a really interesting time right now in terms of thinking about how we link schools into local food production systems and what are the benefits for the wider community. So in terms of our project, what we're aiming to do, and this is an SRA, I should let you know, is to provide an understanding of the current extent and status of school food provision or the providing of food in schools and school food environments in the Pacific Island region. So we are capturing the whole region within this project. And we want to focus on having a better understanding of the enabling policy environment and institutional and farmer capacity to support that integration of local agricultures into schools. Within the SRA, we are trying to identify the country contexts which provide the best opportunities for future work as well. So working through to see where the options might be for scaling up programs that are already in place or looking at how we can modify those for other environments. To give you a quick overview of how we're planning to do this, I've just put a few of our activities on this slide. And again, just to reinforce that, given that we're at the starting point, there are lots of options of how we could link in projects for students. So we'd be more than happy to hear about different ideas. Essentially what we're doing though is we're starting with a regional scoping study to try and identify the school food programs or school food activities that are in place at the moment and that have been recently used, with the aim of developing a database so that we have something which actually records what is working at the moment and what's happening. And within that process, we hope to identify a subset of countries which we will focus, I guess, our deep dive on. And that means looking more into the policy environment and how this is supporting school food programs, and documenting case studies for sharing about what is being done well in the region. And as I mentioned earlier with the aim, it's also around thinking about our local partners and stakeholders and understanding capacity for these programs. What is working well? What are the challenges? What are some of the policy environments that help this in terms of enabling that environment too? And trying to identify future scenarios and possible mechanisms for piloting. With that, I know it's a really quick overview. Unfortunately, I can't stay for the discussions today, but I'm more than happy if anyone does have questions or queries, or you'd like some extra information, please do feel free to reach out to me on that. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you, Sarah. That's really, really important research that Sarah is doing there. And you can connect with Sarah through her email details, which you can find on the research topic list. We're going to have a slight change to the agenda, and we're having Dr. Sese Molimau Samasoni next. Sese is the Manager of Plants and Post-Harvest Technologies Division of the Scientific Research Organization of Samoa. She's talking today about a horticulture research project, adopting a gender-inclusive participatory approach to reducing horticultural food loss in the Pacific. And Sia, you can share your screen, please.
Thanks, Linda. I've just started sharing my screen. Has that come through? Okay,
yes,
great.
It has, thank you.
Just so my internet doesn't get overwhelmed, I'm going to turn my video off while I talk through my presentation. Talo falava, everyone. My name is Dr. Sese Molimau Samasoni, and I'm the project leader for the ACIAR project on adopting a gender-inclusive participatory approach to reducing horticultural loss in the Pacific. Our Pacific Island country research partners for this project include Māori Tonga Trust, the Fiji National University, and the Solomon Islands National University. Our Australian partners include the University of the Sunshine Coast, Western Sydney University, and Griffith University. My next slide is to give you an idea of the big scenario problem that we're trying to address here in the Pacific and how our project fits into that. So I think we can all appreciate and understand that non-communicable diseases is a serious problem in the Pacific. It represents the single largest cause of premature mortality here in the Pacific. And 9 out of 10 of the world's most obese nations are Pacific Island countries. And these countries include American Samoa, Nauru, Cook Islands, Tokelau, Tonga, Samoa, Palau, Kiribati, and Marshall Islands. And of course, a major contributing factor to NCBs in the Pacific is unhealthy diet and poor nutrition. The obvious response to addressing this is to increase the production of fruit and vegetables. However, even in the recent years of the increase in production of fruit and vegetables, we're still not seeing an increase in consumption. And we think that this can also is partly undermined by the losses that occur along fruit and vegetable value chains in the Pacific. And so this represents a research opportunity for us in that how can we reduce food loss? Our research questions include, firstly, what value chains in the Pacific are experiencing high food loss rates? To address this research question, we'll be conducting surveys to assess value chains and their associated losses. So we'll be looking at quantifying post-harvest food losses in these value chains. Secondly, we want to identify what value chains urgently need remediation. And this can be addressed by conducting foresighting exercises to determine value chains of criticality. So for example, if we see a fruit value chain that could be really important in addressing NCDs and that's experiencing high food losses, we would obviously want to prioritize that type of value chain. Thirdly, we then want to identify the drivers or the causes of food loss in these value chains. And this will be addressed by conducting and adopting gender-inclusive traceback surveys to identify the drivers of food loss. Lastly, we'll be looking at identifying interventions that can alleviate or address these drivers of food loss. We'll be looking at conducting workshops to identify the interventions of most applicability, and then conducting on-farm and in-market participatory trials of these interventions to see if they do work in the Pacific scenario. For the master's research topics that we've put forth for the PASS-CR program, we'll be interested in recruiting students who can conduct research under our research questions 1 and 3. So you'll be looking at conducting surveys, as I've spoken about before. If you do become part of our research family, your research will then contribute to the generation of new knowledge on which commodities, locations, marketing systems, and value chains are most vulnerable to high food losses. You'll also be contributing to the generation of new knowledge on the drivers, attitudes, and capacities that lead to food loss in the Pacific. Overall, our research will be looking at increasing fruit and vegetable availability. This will lead to reduced cost of fruit and vegetables, and lastly, leading to increased purchase and consumption of fruit and vegetables in the Pacific to try and address our NCD problems. On the other side of the spectrum, our farmers will have more produce for sale if they have less food loss. That can mean increased profitability and increased income for them, which can in turn translate to improved purchasing behavior for more healthy food. On that note, I'm looking forward to people contacting me on this email address to show their interest in being part of our research family. Thank you.
Thank you, Say. You made that sound wonderful, and really lovely to hear you say that you would become the potential scholar would be part of the project family. Thank you very much for that presentation. Now we have Dr. Rob McGavin, who is a research facility and project manager for Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. It's a forestry project that Rob is presenting on today on coconut and other non-traditional forest resources for the manufacture of engineered wood products. I believe that you're running your own slides, Rob?
Hopefully.
Fantastic, thank you.
Is that showing okay now, Linda?
That's wonderful, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for the opportunity. It's looks like I'm the sole presenter for forestry, but with the amount of research topics we've got at the end of this slideshow, maybe I've done more than my fair share for forestry. So I'm going to talk to you quickly this morning about a project that I lead, an ACIAR project that we short titled the Future Engineered Wood Product Project, or the Future EWP Project. So before we sort of jump in the project, I thought I'd just give you a really quick introduction on who's talking. Who I am. So a little bit about my background. I'm employed by the Queensland Government within the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. I'm based here at a suburb called Salisbury, just on the southern side of Brisbane. So I'm the project leader for the project we'll talk about this morning, but my official job title is actually Research Facility and Project Manager. So I look after the research facility here in Salisbury, as well as lead a number.
Is the view on your phone?
Oh, sorry, is that someone talking there? I'll assume not. So that's my job title. Forestry is my background, although really my specialist expertise really rests in more the wood science, processing technologies, and engineered wood product manufacture space. Despite my young appearance in the photo, I have been around for a little while. And I've just clocked up, or just about to clock up, 27 years experience here in the field of wood science R&D. My PhD is also in wood science back in 2016. I'm not an academic. As I say, I am employed by the Queensland Government, but I do hold a number of adjunct positions and work with a number of universities, both in Australia and abroad. So I've got some connections there with FNU, Griffith University School of Engineering, and a couple of formal appointments within UQ in a couple of different schools. So a little bit about the project. So we call it the Future EWP Project. The official title is actually Coconut and Other Non-Traditional Forest Resources for the Manufacture of Engineered Wood Products. So there is a bit of a project aim there. I won't read that one out. I'll probably give you a slightly longer spiel. So what this project essentially seeks to do is support the establishment of a new value chain that allows unproductive senile coconut palms to be used in the manufacture of high-value engineered wood products. So the sale of those senile palms, which are essentially characterised by low or absent nut production, will help facilitate and offset the costs with the establishment of new food crops, whether that be coconut or other, essentially boosting food production rates and financial viability of farming communities, while the coconut logs will supplement timber processors who are constrained by traditional and now very limited timber resources. So what we hope there is these new engineered wood products that we expect to develop through the project will hopefully attract enough value in the supply chain that provides real and long-term benefits throughout the entire value chain. So it's a 5-year project. It's one of the longer ones for ACIAR, and we've been running now for about 18 months. In terms of project partnerships, we've got way too many to put individual names, unfortunately, but just in terms of institutions and who we're working with. Obviously, ACIAR is one of the main funding providers, not the only one, but certainly the main one. Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, the organisation I work for, is the project leader. We work with SPC, and we've got 2 full-time staff engaged through SPC, directly aligned to the project. We work closely with Farmer Plus, certainly with some of their value chain specialists and resource economists. Fiji Ministry of Forestry, we've had a long relationship of working with the ministry there, and particularly the team based at the Timber Utilisation Division. University of Queensland, we've got some special expertise there in the world of social science and gender studies, as well as resource economics. And we've got a PhD student based out of University of Queensland in that resource economic space already. Griffith University, mainly with their School of Engineering. And again, we've got a PhD student work there on doing some work around product construction, modelling and performance testing. Fiji National University, and very importantly with them, we've got 2 current PASS Scholarship awardees based out of FNU, and the University of South Pacific. And that's mainly at the moment working around the social studies, gender inclusiveness type space as well. So this is very much an industry development project. So we have a number of industry partners on this from Fiji. We've got Ply Fiji, Long Investment, and VTB. Now they're the dominant plywood producers in Fiji at present. We've also got Taitava Uni and Fiji Harbour Board participating as well. And then from Australia, we've got a number of Australian industry partners as well. That's the Big River Group, Eco Cottages, Robertson Brothers Sawmill, and Jowett Adhesives. So they're all wood processing companies or product manufacturers. So in terms of products, I just thought I'd put a couple up there to visualize it. I'm sure everyone on the screen or on taking part in this event knows what a coconut palm looks like. This is what it looks like after we've had a bit of a play with it. So there's just a bit of a range of sort of product examples of what we're looking to do with those senile coconut palms to allow them to be removed away from farming land, taking up valuable space and time, but not being very productive. And a couple more photos there of the types of things that are possible. So in terms of potential scholarship topics, I've actually put forward quite a few. The first 2 there are really based around our gender inclusiveness program. So as I said, we're working quite closely with the specialists at both USP and University of Queensland. And the 2 topics there, the first one's opportunities for promoting gender balanced participation throughout the forest products industry. And the second one's a little bit more focused. So it's around creating an enabling environment for women in non-traditional occupations with a very strong focus around timber manufacturing. The third topic there is really connected to the sort of the not coconut, obviously, but the other part of our project is looking at other resources that the timber industry may be able to access and how they might be able to incorporate a range of different resources into the manufacture of these products. So if I just jump back quickly, you'll see the left-hand and bottom photo. They actually include wood species other than coconut in those manufacturers. So we're interested in looking at some of those lesser known commercial timbers or exotic species that are available to the timber industry, but the timber industry aren't really sure what those species are like and how suitable they are for engineered wood product manufacture. So that's our topic number 3, looking at fundamental wood properties and the suitability of those other species to incorporate in engineered wood product manufacture. Topic number 4 is around log grading. So when we want to harvest our coconut logs, we only want to target those ones that are classified as senile. So we don't want to be removing palms that are still productive and still producing nuts. We actually want those ones which are taking up valuable space but not yielding much benefit. So we need some way to be able to categorise and identify those particular palms that we want to target for this project. So this topic may then incorporate a little bit more around how you might go about accessing those logs and even maybe down to some of the guidelines on how a harvesting operation may go about to actually then access and remove those logs as well. Topic number 5 is around grading techniques for coconut veneer. So the process we're going to do with these senile palms is we'll actually rotary veneer them and produce very thin veneers and then restack them back up into products. And there's well-established grading techniques all around the world for classical wood, but coconut doesn't yield classical wood veneer. It's a little bit different in its structure and anatomy, and that's going to require a very different and certainly new grading system to allow those qualities to be segregated and sorted, and enable that those different qualities to access the market, appropriately at the appropriate price. So that's topic 5. Number 6 is around developing management techniques that ensures the ongoing health of coconut plantations after harvesting. So many would know that coconut plantations, and certainly coconut palm residue, can be prone to attack and rapid population growth of a rhinoceros beetle. What we don't want to do is harvest our senile palms out and then create this biological hazard where rhinoceros beetle infestations start to come in and then potentially start to degrade the remaining coconut stand, which we want to keep going. Number 7 is around manufacturing of products. So some manufacturing protocols. So look, that topic there would probably need to have very close alignment with the team here at Salisbury and Brisbane. So we'd have to look at ensuring there are opportunities to spend sufficient time here in Brisbane to access the equipment to enable that work, equipment and the expertise to enable that project to happen. But certainly a very important one for the project. Topic number 8 is around log heating. So one of the key elements we've found to enable coconut logs to be peeled is you need to heat them first to soften the material. But there's been minimal work done on how best to do that in a commercial situation, and what sort of conditions are optimal for that to occur. And number 9, the final one, is exploration of coconut palm harvesting residues as an alternative source of energy. So bioenergy is quite a topical subject around the world at the moment. And obviously, if we're going to be harvesting material, we won't be able to use all of that harvested material for our target engineered wood product process. But perhaps some of that residue that remains in terms of benefits to maintaining the forest health could be to remove those residues and do something else with it. So that's my long list of 9 topics.
Thank you, Rob. You're certainly very keen to have a student associated with your project. You've put forward 9 research topics. Thank you, Rob. That's fantastic. Now we're going over to Professor Stephen Underhill. Stephen is the project leader for the Academic Support Program as part of the PASS-CR program. But he's also the director of the Australian Centre for Pacific Islands Research here at the University of the Sunshine Coast, and a professor of horticulture. His project he's presenting on today is a horticulture project again on enhanced fruit systems for Tonga and Samoa. This is phase 2, a community-based citrus production. And Lisa, you'll be sharing the presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Linda. Lisa, we'll just leave it on the first slide for the first bit, I think. So thank you very much for the opportunity to just give you a bit of a snapshot about the project. So this is an ongoing long-term initiative in fruit crops in the South Pacific. We previously finished phase 1 about 6 to 8 months ago. And so this is obviously the second phase of that activity. So this project has 2 core objectives. One is to try and increase citrus production in Tonga. Citrus is grown in Tonga, but primarily sourced from wild, non-grafted seed sourced material. And we're also, a second objective of this activity is to try and improve existing production systems in Samoa. So Samoa already has a reasonable citrus industry. The reasonable justification for the study is basically we're trying to map onto government priorities across the Pacific to help diversify locally grown fruits. And the driver for this, which Sarah's already mentioned, is the high rates of non-communicable diseases and diabetes across the Pacific. So why citrus? Well, citrus is a diabetically compatible fruit. It has what is reasonably critical a counter-seasonal supply, so it tends to hit the market in that April, May, June period when tropical fruits tend to be their least available. It has a very good post-harvest shelf life, so therefore it lends itself for inter-island trade and some of the challenges that come with small island and smallholder farmer production systems. And we also know that there's a significant local demand for citrus. In Tonga, for example, it's the second most imported fruit crop into that country. So, and in terms of the team that is underpinning this project, as Linda was saying, it's University of Sunshine Coast, but we also have ACIAR, the Scientific Research Organisation of Samoa, the Ministry of Agriculture in Tonga and Samoa, and Mordi, one of the main NGOs in Tonga, and also a commercial partner, Nishi Trading, which is a major exporter come commercial enterprise in Tonga as well. In terms of the research themes or the research areas we're working on, there's a whole focus on production post-harvest challenges, and that involves, we go back to the second slide. So there's a whole lot of challenges in this project looking at post-harvest and production related issues to try and get that production in place. And one of the key challenges there is obviously cyclone related impacts to orchard-based production. There's a whole lot of food processing and food value adding type activities to try and diversify rather than just necessarily have a fresh product, have a range of different products that we're making available to the market. There's some scale out activities that we're involved with as well in this project, and that involves looking at positioning citrus within healthy food gardens. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And there's also a health impact element to the project as well. So in terms of what does that all mean in terms of a student that might be interested in being aligned to this project? Well, this is a ongoing initiative. And so we've recently only just commenced this. So this has got a 4-year life cycle. So it enables either a PhD or master's participation. One of the critical elements of anyone being involved in this project is the field work will have to be undertaken either in Samoa or Tonga because of the focus of the work. So obviously the literature review and elsewhere can be done outside of those two countries, but the field work needs to be done in those countries. The research topics I'll talk about in a minute give you opportunities to be involved in some of the key priority areas across the Pacific. This is the health and nutrition challenge, the climate change, and some of the community engagement. So we think the research topics that we're presenting have marketability in terms of the skill sets that you'll get as a consequence of being involved. This will give you an opportunity to work with some of the key research providers and NGOs in the Pacific in terms of a very, very strong relationship with CA and ACIAR in Samoa, and also Mordi in Tonga, and Nishi Trading, I should say as well, because they've been an incredible partner for the project. Because this is a second phase, we've got some of the trial sites already established. We have orchards already in place. We have some of the cyclone protective wind structures in place. So there is that element of the trial sites and some of the enabling technologies and some of the enabling infrastructure already being able to be utilized straight away. And I suppose that the final thing, in key points about this project, it's a small team. So it's a tight, small team that's had a lot of experience over many years working in the South Pacific. Can I have the last slide, Lisa? And we'll just go through the topics. So in terms of topics that we're presenting for students, so some of these topics are country specific. So just note that in terms of as we go through them, and we can tailor them to master's or PhD topics. So because there's a central driver for NCD remediation in this project, the first research question we're presenting is all talking about trying to get an understanding about the existing food choice and dietary behaviour. And this will be involving a series of surveys in looking at Tongan consumer purchasing behavioural activities. And that's the critical piece of information that we need in terms of how we design and work towards supply chain to try and maximise consumer uptake. There's some interesting second research questions about this healthy eating garden. So through the project, we have a partnership with Mordi, who is also getting money from IFAD, and IFAD's looking at mainstreaming some of the horticultural crops. And so there's an element here of trying to take citrus and position it within a healthy eating garden context. And so that then has a whole lot of research questions about consumer and community consultation in terms of dietary behavior, but also how we design those gardens and how we interface it in terms of nutritional benefit. So that's another, I suppose, somewhere between horticulture and somewhere between health-related activity. The third research question, and again, this is a Tongan-specific one, solely because that's where we've got our infrastructure in place, is looking at a range of different practical strategies to reduce high wind intensity damage on citrus trees. And so we've established some large wind protective structures at the Nishi trading facility. So that's all in place. And we're looking at some organic systems in some of the other partner trials that we've got as well. So that'll be about looking at practical strategies that can possibly be rolled out. In terms of Samoa, Samoa's a different set of research questions because the industry is at a different stage. So there's a whole lot of effort to try to take some of the surplus production that is very, very seasonally concentrated and look at value adding. So there's this will be involving looking at novel food processing products that can be generated from citrus with a smallholder farmer commercial benefit. So this will be working with Dr. Richard Bayer, who will be known to some of you in terms of a leading food technology expert in the Pacific. And the final research question is, because we again have citrus production and citrus value chains in the Pacific, we also know that we've got significant post-harvest loss underpinning them. And so there's another research question around assessing what that post-harvest losses are, post-harvest handling practices, to try and enable some change practice within the community context to try and reduce food loss. And there's a touch point here between the project CA was talking about previously about food loss and this project. And that's basically the key messages I wanted to unwrap.
Thank you, Stephen. That was great. And again, if anyone is interested in that horticulture project, please stay around and have a chat with Stephen when we go into the breakout rooms. Now, I believe we're having Dr. Walter Okello, who is a research scientist from CSIRO here in Australia. It's a livestock project that Dr. Okello is presenting today. It's on enhancing the management of antimicrobial resistance, EMAR, in Fiji. And I believe you could share your screen, Walter?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I think it's actually Magiri presenting.
Sorry, it's Dr. Royford Magiri from FNU.
Yeah, but I'll be staying on just to answer questions. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. Royford, are you here?
Yes, I
hi.
am here.
Morning.
How are you? Good morning. It's afternoon here.
Afternoon, sorry. I do that every time, sorry. Happy for you to share your screen, Dr. Magiri.
Okay, I will be as brief as possible for today's, because I'll try to make a tailor-made to the project, to the student objective. We are doing the enhancing the management of antimicrobial resistance in Fiji, and as you all know, antimicrobial resistance is an emerging threat in the Pacific, in the world, and in Fiji. Actually, it is estimated to cause 10 million deaths by 2050, more so with diabetes and cancer, as we see it in the Pacific. It has increased the healthcare costs by 6% as of to date, and decreased the global livestock production by 2.6 to 7.5, depending on different geographical regions. At the same time, we have a decrease in GDP by 3.8 as a result of antimicrobial resistance. And at the same time, we estimate that in the Western Pacific region, for example, that loss can be as high as 3.5 trillion over the next 10 years. The project aim, as it's currently running, we have an array of the stakeholders. In Fiji, for example, the local partners, we have the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, FNU College of Agriculture, and FNU College of Medicine, and other stakeholders, either farmers, local farmers, and the Biosecurity Authority. At the Australia, we also have University of Technology, Sydney, University of Southern Australia, the Future Industry Laboratories, but the project is mainly led by Walter O'Carroll from the CSIRO, and the project mostly the strength delivers strength from the CSIRO. The broader objective of the project is to enhance integrated management of antimicrobial resistance in a sustainable and cost-effective manner, resulting into better health outcome. And what we are doing that in the specific objective, the first one is to develop a prototype AMR, antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial use surveillance system. We realize that in Fiji and the Pacific, for example, there exists no AMR research and surveillance system that needed to be established. And all these surveillance system, we have since agreed that we are doing it in a One Health approach. We are doing surveillance in human, animal, and environmental sampling through data collection at various sample locations. We are also, the other aim was to develop the laboratory capacity and appropriate diagnostic technology to be able to respond to future pandemic. We all know, including AMR, which is also a zoonotic, monkeypox that is currently underway, originating from animals and jumped to human. COVID-19 is also believed to have jumped from animals to human. And we're also building laboratory capacity existing in animal, human, and environmental, and the teaching lab across Fiji. And the other objective is to develop the risk and socioeconomic evaluation framework for assessing the AMR. We are doing the risk and economic framework and cost and burden of AMR, of course, using some case study like Daily and CWM. And we also looking to assist in formulation of AMR policies, including antimicrobial stewardship at the local, national, and regional levels. We are doing this mostly with the ministry, with the local ministries, and also the Fiji Consumer Council to enhance the antimicrobial stewardship and on the general public, farmers, community, and also the patient and the practitioners, that is veterinarians and the general practitioners and specialized surgeons in our healthcare system. Basically, the project is more complex than we thought. On the surveillance, laboratory capacity building, list, and economic analysis, we are collecting samples from human health data. There's some human health team that is working. There is animal health sampling team that is working, and there's an environmental sampling team that is working, mainly learned from USP. Those data are collected and analyzed in different laboratories. We also have knowledge, attitude, and practices studies, and laboratory capacity building is ongoing, and that is where our strength is based. In the project, we already have 2 students that one is finishing, another one is starting a research, and all that data is pulled together to have a data integration, and then having the economic studies to be able to pass our research to the decision making. And our major decision making here, when we talk about the decision making, we are working closely with the National Antimicrobial Resistance Committee of Fiji, that has been mandated by the Ministry of Health to be able to handle the antimicrobial resistance. Just for the diagram of policy and communication on research on AMR, we are just trying to highlight how complex it is, because AMR is a One Health issue originating from animals and environment interaction that are actually food that is being produced that is actually very independent from human sources. And in this case, we normally say humans are fed by food that is produced without their concern. And that is why we are trying to link all of them. And in the communication, we have an array of communication from farmers to the general public and to the policymakers of the boardroom to be able to develop some guidelines. We have been able to, since then, we have been able to develop some antimicrobial use guideline for human. We are also trying to develop antimicrobial guideline for animals. And we have realized we cannot be able to develop that unless, because Fiji, as you know, there is high shortage of veterinarian in the Pacific, in Fiji and the Pacific. For example, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fiji, has only three qualified vets. And that is what we are looking at the next. In the current scholarship, before I even talk about that, is the livestock sector is emerging as one of the fastest growing agricultural subsector in the Pacific. And this growth could further accelerate due to growing income and high economic elasticity for demand of livestock products. This may increase the pressure for increased use of antimicrobials. We have already realized that in our first studies. And this combating AMR requires a One Health approach. And in our case, there is high shortage of veterinarian in the Pacific. We have successive capitalization of such opportunities that require policy regime change that facilitate growth and productivity at the farm level, as well as increase in the processing sector. But what we have now is the public sector continues to be the primary provider of veterinary services in the Pacific and in the most developing countries, and the deteriorating physical situation of most of the state governments, especially the small Pacific Island nation, is making it extremely difficult for it to be able to expand the reach of services or improve the quality of services or even offer the services at all. And evaluation of this desirability of the use of fees, private delivery of livestock services requires an understanding of the factors influencing the demand of these services. For example, in our case, the Ministry of Agriculture, there are only probably 3 veterinarians in Fiji in the ministry. Probably there is no vet in Vanuatu and no vet in Samoa where the project will be based. We are looking at where we have gone at the level of having discussed, we have been able to have an agenda through the EMA project. One of the key agenda that has been pushed is the amendment of Veterinary Surgeons Act, and that amendment will include the space for paravet. And it is not only the government that supplies the veterinary services. Most of the countries like Australia in the food production industry, the government has really since released it to private practitioners. But to be able to advise on the way we are going with the paravet, whether they can be able to operate privately, there is no, we really don't know what is happening out there. We don't know whether there is supply, and if there is supply, if we supply what is needed, which are some of the services to veterinary, to prevent the farmers from actually using antibiotics and self-medicating the animals, we don't know whether they will be able to pay. And that is where we are currently now going on with the EMA project, and the students will actually really help us to understand what we should be able to go. Are the farmers willing to pay for the services, or they want the government to continue offering the services? And those are some of the questions that can be answered with the supply and demand. I think apart from that, then I'll be able to respond to some of the questions during the breakout. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McGeary. And yes, please stay around and answer questions in the breakout sessions. We are running a little bit behind time, so if I could ask presenters to please stick to 5 minutes, that would be fantastic. Our next presenter is Dr. Mary Johnson, who's a research fellow from RMIT, and her project is a social systems project, land care and agricultural extension and community development model at district and national scale in Fiji. And Lisa, are you happy to share? Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'll just start with the title of this, Land Care, an Agricultural Extension and Community Development Model. And there's two key areas in this. It's around extension and community development and the nexus between where extension and community development meet. And yes, it sits in the social sciences portfolio. So it's about people. It's about smallholder farmers, extension officers, education, and everything that goes towards agricultural production and natural resource management. Next slide, please, Lisa. So the duration is 4 years and we're into the second year, but I've got to say with COVID, we had quite a bit of slippage because nobody could do anything in the first year, but we used that first year for a lot of consultation and a lot of Zoom meetings. So, and there's a variation to the project that takes it out a bit. It's a tri-country project between Fiji, the Philippines and Australia. And the project partners, they're loosely grouped, although these overlap a lot, and they're grouped under, say, funding and agricultural research and development. So we have ACIAR sitting there, but we also have the Philippines Council for Agriculture, Aquatic and Natural Resources Development, PICARD. Under the research, we have in the Philippines University of Philippines Los Banos and the University of Philippines Mindanao, and RMIT University, in Melbourne, the university that I work for. And then the overlap here is that Fiji National University hosts our research team, but also comes into this circle of core team members. So Fiji National University, RMIT, the Ministry of Agriculture Fiji is a primary partner, and Te Te Taveuni, the Farmers Association. And down the bottom, capacity, we have support coming in from the Land Care Foundation of the Philippines and Global Land Care. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit, so just to step back, it's a multidisciplinary team. There are ecologists, agronomists, soil scientists, agroforestry, and gender study, and it's very mixed. And that's because it's represented by what happens in the daily life of farmers and all the expertise that may well be needed to assist the farming community. Next slide, please, Lisa. So the project aims is to test whether a land care approach, and in the next few slides, I'll explain land care and I'll explain livelihood improvement. So to test whether a land care approach using the livelihood improvement through facilitated extension life model can be adapted from one country context to another through improving climate change resilience of our rural communities, predominantly our farming communities, the management of natural resources, sustainable agricultural productivity, and gender equity. And this project will build on existing projects and initiatives, and it's looking at strengthening those partnerships. It should be at local level there, as well as nationally and internationally, working with farmers, extension officers and services, and the people that support them. Next slide, please. So just as a bit of explanation, the land care movement first emerged out of Australia in the 1980s as a result of land and water degradation. And it came from the grassroots, but it also had very strong government support. So it's defined as a movement local community action, stewardship and volunteerism and groups. It's a model where there's a range of knowledge generation, sharing, support mechanisms to help the community participation. And there's another important aspect to this about the philosophy, the way that people live and work in the landscape and understand their landscapes, caring for land, soil and water. So essentially that's what land care represents. The little map there, there was a land care study supported by ACIAR that looked at how this had been adopted by other countries and what lessons were learnt, and I can talk about that later. So next slide, please, Lisa. Now, the LIFE model, extension model, was another ACIAR-funded project that was developed, that lasted for 8 years. It only finished last year, and it was about developing, working with conflict vulnerable communities in Mindanao in the Philippines to develop livelihood improvement. And this was through facilitated extension. It was a new way of looking at extension rather than technology transfer, a more participatory way of working with people and with communities. So there were 3 strategies that used, and it was about providing farmer access to technical innovation, training, education, skills and networks. At the same time, building community social capacity, and many of our communities have social capacity in spades, but it's about extending those networks in strategic areas with the people that will support them. And at the same time, collaborating closely with the local institutional partners. So building those effective, sustainable partnerships. Next slide. So they were the 2 models that are going to underpin this project, the lessons that have been drawn out of this. And so drivers for this project, the Fiji Land Care project, is to test whether these an agricultural extension model linked to community development can improve climate change, natural resources, productivity and gender equality. And what does that look like around the nexus of food and nutrition security within the context of culture, heritage and the natural environment? So there was demonstrated evidence and interest in Fiji for testing these land care life approach. And there's been a long consultation process up to the point of getting the project up and going. Next slide, please. So the research question for this project is that can the land care life extension methods, which are aimed at building social capital at local levels, the lessons that were developed out of the southern Philippines, can this be adapted effectively for improved livelihoods and reduced resource degradation in Fiji? That's the key research question for this project. There are sub-questions that go with that research question around the preconditions that exist to enable adaptability. And using the term to adapt, that means to refine in the Fiji context, the lessons that we'll learn from these other extension processes. How can these extension methods contribute to increased gender equity? And what is the appropriate scale for intervention? And who are the partners most appropriate to support implementation? And just while I'm on that, I'll just say that the thesis topics that go with this project around these sorts of they span wide topics. So, for example, we've got understanding the time use of farmers in their livelihood choice at the project sites, exploring the interface between social systems and economic outcomes, understanding that. Farmers' perceptions on climate change impact on their production areas, and targeting capacity building to enhance rural women's livelihoods. So they're at master's levels. Next slide, please. So we have 3 pilot sites or areas: Taveuni Island, Labasa and Sigatoka. And we've started the project starting off there, working with the extension services in those areas and with the farming communities at those sites. Final slide, please. So Vinaka, Salamat, and thank you. And please get in touch with me. I'll be in the breakout session and I'll be delighted to share more about this project with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson, and obviously do stick around to speak to Dr. Johnson if you're interested in that project. Could I just remind everyone to please mute your microphone? And again, we are running out of time, so I'll go straight on to the next presentation, who is Dr. Ben McDonald, who's the Group Leader of Soils and Landscapes, Agriculture and Food at CSIRO. His project is Soil and Land Management. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll keep it brief because the important part here is being with the students.
Yes,
so
thank you.
The project's pretty self-explanatory. We're looking at how to improve soil management across a number of different Pacific islands, being Vanuatu, Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji. There's a range of partners there. SPC is also involved. So what we want to do is look at fundamental soil properties, how they've changed through time, use advanced methods to understand that, things which can be done in the field, portable technology, and then integrating that into the digital soil mapping and digital systems. There's a lot of opportunity. So if you're interested in going out and measuring soils, working in agricultural systems with a variety of crops, or you're interested in computer systems and modeling and those sort of things, there's opportunities within this project. I'll leave it there and I look forward to talking to people who are interested at the breakout session.
Thank you, Ben. That's great. Thank you very much. And now I think we have Dr. Rajesh Prasad with the Fisheries Project. Dr. Rajesh Prasad is from the University of the South Pacific. Rajesh, are you there?
Thank you, Lisa and Linda.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
All right. Now, this is a fisheries aquaculture related project. I think just the only one suggested. There's a project already, ACIAR project already happening, as you can see on the slide. And it is happening mainly in Vietnam and Philippines under the leadership of Professor Paul Southgate. And now the project that we are suggesting is an extension or a branching out of that project, and it's going to be based in Fiji. And we have a group of partners or researchers included, Associate Professor Ravinesh Ram from the National University, Dr. Mono Lal, myself, and possibly a couple more other people who will join us. So you can see the main project is increasing the technical skills supporting the community-based sea cucumber production. Now, sea cucumbers are very important in the Pacific context as well, and because it has been a major livelihood option for many of the outer island people, as well as the fishermen in the major islands. The biggest problem that we are seeing is overharvesting of the sea cucumbers, and for that reason there has been a ban for a while in Fiji. Unfortunately, there is a small window of bend uplift, so that some of the outer island people can harvest again, and this is because of the hardships people are facing as a result of COVID-19. The bend uplift is only for a short period of time, and the bend will be reimposed. Now, with the population decrease in of the sea cucumbers, the outcomes and the harvesting that the people are getting is not so much. So we are worried. The concern is that the population decrease might occur further, and the sea cucumber Holothuria scabra is the #1 species that has been exploited. So we are looking at this research title, one topic, looking at the ocean acidification of the life cycle of the sea cucumber. Within the sea cucumber life cycle, there are various stages, and within the sea cucumber skeletons, which has got the external testa, and within that we have the calcium ossicles. Now, there is literature says that as ocean acidification occurs, there is thinning of the shells in bivalves, and possibly we might see impact on the testa and the ossicles in the sea cucumbers. But we want to look at where that might occur. In the life cycle stages, the auricularia stage is where the calcification and ossification occurs. But we are going to want to look at all the other stages, because acidification might actually cause mortality in other stages. So it's a very, very straightforward project. So we're looking at the stress due to climate change, and that's where we might also include another collaborator from the University of Queensland, Dr. Edward Narayan, who has done some work on the stress-related mucus secretions in sea cucumbers. And out of the topic, there's various other parts that we might be also including, which is looking at the food security and the economic options, and the ecosystem disturbance, as well as the because of the acidification. And the one other major part we want to include within the project is whether acidification might change the genetic structure of the sea cucumber itself. So whether there is any current mutations, and whether there is going to be any mutations occurring. And one of our collaborators is well known for his work on genetic stuff. So I'll leave it there, and I can talk to the students when we break out into when we go into the breakout rooms. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prasad, and thank you for being brief there. And now we're going to go straight into the Zoom breakout rooms. So Lisa has set up the Zoom breakout rooms, and they're all named with the discipline. So join the breakout room that you are interested in after those fabulous presentations today. I think there's a bit of competition between the project leaders. So straight into the breakout rooms, please, Lisa. Your incredible staying power and staying on this Zoom session for the whole 2 hours. I really appreciate that. I hope that you've had the opportunity to ask the questions that you wanted to, but if you haven't, please contact the project leader using the contact details that are available on all the documentation that we've sent out over multiple platforms. Sorry, Adigoke, could you mute your microphone for a second? And if you have any other questions about the program in general, you can either contact the PASS-CR email, or you can contact the universities themselves. All the contact details are available on the website too. Hannah's just putting it up there for you. Thank you, Hannah. We do have, if people are happy to stay on and ask, I'm happy to answer another couple of questions, but we do have a survey just about this whole research projects showcase, whether it's been beneficial for you or not. And I think that Lisa is going to share that survey. It pops up at the end.
It pops up at the end.
Oh, okay.
The end of the
Okay.
session. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Does anybody have a question? Not that I'm necessarily going to know the answer, but I'll try.
I think it's probably been a long
No?
time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to close up now, and the survey should pop up on the screen. Thanks again for joining, and we will be having another Zoom Q&A session just about the program in general if you do have any other further questions. And we'll let you know when that will be in the next couple of weeks. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.